The mighty oak, a personal exploration of Quercus. The oak, a symbol of strength and longevity, has captivated me since I was a child. Growing up, I would spend countless hours exploring the woods near my home, marveling at the towering oaks that seemed to touch the sky. Their gnarled branches, covered in moss and lichen, told stories of years gone by, and the rustling of their leaves was a constant source of comfort. It was this early fascination that sparked my lifelong interest in the Quercus genus. A diverse family. Quercus is a diverse genus of trees and shrubs belonging to the beech family, Fagaceae. With an estimated 657 species, oaks are found throughout the northern hemisphere, from the cool temperate zones to the tropical highlands. They are a keystone species in many ecosystems, providing food and shelter for a wide range of animals. One of the things that makes Quercus so fascinating is the sheer variety within the genus. From the majestic white oak, Quercus alba, with its broad leaves and spreading crown, to the scrubby live oak, Quercus virginiana, with its evergreen foliage and gnarled branches. Each species has its own unique characteristics. Some oaks, like the cork oak, Quercus suber, are even cultivated for their bark, which is used to make wine stoppers and other products. FAQs. What does an oak tree leaf look like? I love running through the park near my house in the fall, especially when the leaves are turning. Oak leaves are the ones I look out for the most. They're big and bold, with deep notches that make them look almost like they have fingers. The edges aren't smooth and round like some other leaves, but more jagged and a little rough to the touch. It's like the oak tree itself is reflected in its leaves, strong and steady, with a wild side. What does an oak tree symbolize? For me, oak trees have always symbolized perseverance. There's this giant oak in my grandpa's backyard that's been there for as long as anyone can remember. It's seen so much scorching summers, harsh winters, even a couple of lightning strikes. Yet, there it stands, strong and steady, its branches reaching out like arms that have weathered every storm. It reminds me that no matter what life throws my way, I can dig in my roots and keep growing. Can you kill an oak tree by trimming it? Absolutely. Trimming an oak tree the wrong way can definitely do it in. Remember that old oak in my grandpa's yard? Well, a few years back we had a rough storm that ripped off a giant branch. We called in a professional arborist to clean it up, and he gave us a whole lesson on oak care. Apparently, you can't just hack away at them like any other tree. Prune at the wrong time of year, and you risk oak wilt, a nasty disease spread by bugs that love fresh cuts. Do a bad job of the cut itself, and you leave the tree open to infection. It's all about making sure the cuts are clean and done at the right time, so the oak can heal itself up proper. Best to leave the trimming to a pro. That's what I learned. How much does an oak tree cost? The price of an oak tree can vary wildly, depending on a few things. I saw some small ones online for under $50, which is pretty affordable. But that's just a little guy in a pot. If you want a more established oak tree, like something that'll actually cast some shade in your yard, then you're looking at hundreds of dollars, maybe even over $1,000. It all depends on how big you want it, what specific type of oak it is, and where you buy it from. How tall can an oak tree grow? Oaks might not be the skyscraping giants like redwoods, but they can definitely hold their own in the height department. In my grandpa's neighborhood, there's this majestic live oak with these sprawling branches that cast shade over the entire street. It's got to be at least as tall as the two-story house next to it, maybe even taller. I looked it up online once, and apparently some oak species can reach up to 100 feet tall. That's incredible to think about, a tree that's been growing for decades, towering over everything around it. Standing next to a giant oak like that makes you feel small, but also strangely protected. It's a reminder of the enduring strength and power of nature. How to identify a white oak tree? White oaks, those are some beauties. Here's how I spot them on my nature walks. First, check the bark. Unlike some other oaks with smooth surfaces, white oaks have a light gray bark that looks almost like long, skinny scales. It's kind of cool. You can even brush off small flakes with your fingers. Then take a peek at the leaves. White oak leaves are big, broad things with 5 to 9 lobes that jut out from the center like fingers. The key thing is these lobes. They're rounded at the tips, not pointed, and there are usually an equal number on either side of the leaf. Imagine a hand with all smooth, rounded fingertips. That's the vibe. Finally, if it's acorn season, fall is usually prime time. Look for the acorns. White oak acorns are oval-shaped and sit in a shallow cup at the base. They're a bit stubby compared to some other oak acorns, and the cap doesn't fully cover the nut itself. With a bit of practice, you'll be a white oak pro in no time. Is an oak tree a producer? Absolutely. Those mighty oaks are definitely producers in the whole ecosystem. Remember all those picnics I have under the shade of giant oaks? Well, those trees aren't just providing cool spots. They're creating their own food. They use sunlight, water, and air to make their own sugar through photosynthesis, just like other plants. That sugar fuels the whole tree, from its massive trunk down to the tiniest leaf. Pretty cool, right? I think it makes those shady afternoons under the oak trees even more special. How to transplant an oak tree. Transplanting an oak tree, especially a mature one, is a tricky business. Let me tell you, it's not something I'd ever attempt on my own. Those things have deep taproots that stretch way down into the earth. Trying to dig up a whole oak tree without damaging those roots would be like trying to pull up a dandelion with a teaspoon. I've seen crews transplant some younger oaks in my neighborhood, and it's a whole operation. They bring in these big machines to carefully loosen the soil around the tree and lift it out, root ball and all. It's amazing how much dirt these things hold on to. Even for smaller oaks, professionals recommend digging a wide planting hole in the new location and keeping the root ball as intact as possible. If you're thinking about transplanting an oak, especially a big one, my advice is to call in a professional arborist. They have the expertise and the equipment to do the job right and give your oak the best chance of survival in its new home. What is the fastest growing oak tree? In my experience, the fastest growing oak tree is probably the Nuttall oak, also sometimes called the water oak or pin oak. I remember reading about them when I was helping my grandpa research trees for his backyard. They grow much faster than some other oaks, like maybe a foot or two per year, compared to just a few inches for some varieties. That might not seem like a huge difference, but it adds up over time. If you're looking for an oak that will fill out your yard quickly and provide shade sooner rather than later, the Nuttall oak seems like a strong contender. Of course, always check with your local nursery to see what varieties do best in your climate. How to get rid of oak tree caterpillars. Those pesky oak tree caterpillars can be a real nuisance. I've battled them a few times on the oaks in my grandpa's yard. Here's what's worked for me. For smaller infestations, the good old-fashioned hand-picking method is surprisingly effective. Grab a bucket of soapy water and go on a caterpillar safari. Just be careful, some caterpillars can irritate your skin, so maybe wear some gloves. If you're dealing with a bigger problem, a safer option is to spray the leaves with a product containing Bacillus thuringiensis. Also known as Bt, it's a natural bacteria that's harmless to people and most beneficial insects, but deadly to munching caterpillars. Just make sure to follow the instructions on the label carefully and apply on a sunny day when the caterpillars are actively feeding. For a more eco-friendly approach, you can try spraying the caterpillars directly with insecticidal soap or horticultural oil. These products smother the caterpillars and won't harm the tree itself. Remember, the key is to catch the infestation early before the caterpillars have a chance to munch through all the leaves. With a little vigilance, you can keep those oak trees healthy and happy. How to tell if an oak tree is dying. Having spent a lot of time around Grandpa's oak tree, I've learned a few things about spotting an unhappy oak. Here are some signs to watch out for. Leaf troubles. A healthy oak should have a full canopy of green leaves. If the leaves are turning brown or yellow and falling prematurely, that's a red flag. This could be a sign of disease, insect infestation, or lack of nutrients. Branch woes. Look out for dead branches on the oak. If it's just a single branch, it might be from a storm or disease, but if many branches are dying back from the tips towards the trunk, that's a bigger issue. Bark blues. A healthy oak's bark should be firmly attached and have a rough texture. If the bark is cracked, peeling away, or soft and mushy, that's a bad sign. It could be a sign of disease or insect damage. Leaning tower of oak. While a slight lean might not be a huge deal, if the oak is tilting significantly, it could be a sign of root damage or instability. This could be a safety hazard and needs attention. Fungus among us. Fungi growing on the trunk or branches of the oak isn't a good sign. These can be indicators of decay and disease in the tree. If you notice any of these signs, it's best to call in a certified arborist. They can diagnose the problem and recommend the best course of action, whether it's treatment, pruning, or even removal in the worst-case scenario. Remember, it's always better to catch a tree problem early on. What does oak tree bark look like? Oak tree bark is a great way to identify the type of oak tree you're looking at. Here's a rundown of what to expect. Generally thick and rough. Unlike some other trees with smooth surfaces, oak trees have a thick and rough bark that gets even more textured as the tree matures. Color variations. Oak bark can come in a variety of colors, depending on the species. Red oaks tend to have a brown-reddish hue, while white oaks have a lighter gray or brown color. Deep fissures. As the tree grows older, the bark develops deep fissures or long cracks that run vertically along the trunk. These fissures can be quite dramatic and add to the rustic character of the oak tree. Here are some additional details that can help you distinguish between different types of oak trees based on their bark. White oak bark. Lighter gray or brown with a scaly texture. The scales are long and thin, and you can sometimes brush off small flakes with your fingers. Red oak bark. Darker and has a more blocky or plate-like texture compared to white oak bark. It may also have lighter streaks running down the trunk. Why is my oak tree losing leaves in summer? There are a couple of reasons why your oak tree might be losing leaves in summer, and it depends a bit on how the leaves are looking. Here are the two most common culprits: heat and drought stress. This is the most likely reason, especially if you're experiencing a hot, dry summer. Trees lose water through their leaves, and when it's scorching hot and rain is scarce, they might shed some leaves to conserve moisture. It's a survival tactic. Better to lose a few leaves than risk the whole tree drying out. If the leaves are turning brown and crispy before falling, this is a good sign it's heat and drought related. Pests and diseases. While less common than heat stress, insects and diseases can also cause leaf loss in oaks. If the leaves have holes, chewed edges, or unusual spots or discolorations before dropping, it could be a sign of pests. Fungal diseases might cause wilting or black spots. If you suspect pests or disease, it's best to call in a certified arborist to diagnose the problem and recommend treatment. Here are a few things you can do to help your oak tree through a hot summer. Water deeply. If you haven't had any rain recently, give your oak a good, deep watering. Aim for the base of the tree, soaking the root zone rather than just sprinkling the top of the soil. Mulch around the base. A layer of mulch around the base of the tree will help retain moisture in the soil. Avoid pruning in summer. Major pruning can stress the tree further during hot weather. Hopefully, with a little TLC and some cooler weather, your oak tree will perk up and keep those green leaves through the rest of the summer. But if you're really worried, consulting a certified arborist is always a good idea. How to neuter an oak tree. There isn't actually a way to neuter an oak tree. Neutering refers to removing reproductive organs in animals, and plants don't have them in the same way. Oak trees reproduce by producing acorns, but you can't remove a specific part of the tree to stop this. However, there are a couple of things you might be thinking of. Acorn production. If you're bothered by all those acorns falling from your oak tree, there are ways to manage them. Pruning the tree can help reduce the number of acorns it produces, especially if you focus on removing branches higher up in the canopy. You can also rake up or vacuum fallen acorns to prevent them from sprouting new oak trees. Chemical growth regulators. Some people use chemical growth regulators on trees to reduce fruit production. However, these chemicals can have unintended consequences and aren't generally recommended for healthy oak trees. If you're looking to control the acorn situation, I'd recommend talking to a certified arborist. They can advise you on the best course of action for your specific tree and situation. What is eating my oak tree leaves? Identifying what's munching on your oak tree leaves depends on the kind of damage you're seeing. Here are some common culprits to consider. Caterpillars. These are a classic enemy of oak leaves. If you see large sections of leaves missing, or if the leaves have skeletonized remains with just the veins left, caterpillars are a prime suspect. Look for droppings or clusters of the critters themselves on the underside of leaves. Leaf miners. These are small insects that burrow inside the leaf, creating winding tunnels or blotches. You might notice brown, squiggly lines on the surface of the leaves. Leaf beetles. These guys come in a variety of shapes and sizes, but they all love to chomp on leaves. Look for ragged edges or holes with clean-cut margins. Chewing insects. This is a broad category that includes creatures like grasshoppers, crickets, and even some beetles. They'll leave irregular holes or chewed edges on the leaves. Once you have a better idea of the culprit, you can take steps to address them. Here are some options. Hand picking. If the infestation is small, you can try hand picking the insects off the tree. Wear gloves and drop them into a bucket of soapy water. Insecticidal soap or neem oil spray. These organic options can be effective against a variety of leaf-munching insects. Be sure to follow the instructions on the label carefully. BT spray. Bacillus thuringiensis, BT, is a natural bacteria that's harmless to people and most beneficial insects, but deadly to caterpillars. This can be a good choice if you're dealing with a caterpillar invasion. Encourage beneficial insects. Beneficial insects like ladybugs and lacewings are natural predators of many leaf-eating pests. Planting flowering plants near your oak tree can attract these beneficial insects to your yard. How to make oak tree grow faster. There's no magic bullet to make an oak tree grow super fast, but you can definitely give it a healthy environment that encourages strong, steady growth. Here are some tips I've picked up over the years. Planting right. Pick the perfect spot. Oaks are sun-loving creatures, so plant your tree in a location that gets at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight daily. Avoid squeezing it in next to buildings or power lines that could shade it out. Right kind of soil. Oaks prefer well-draining, slightly acidic soil. If your soil is heavy clay or very sandy, you might need to amend it with some compost or organic matter to improve drainage and nutrient content. Give it room to breathe. Don't plant your oak tree too close to other trees, buildings, or walkways. These majestic giants need space to spread their roots and branches as they mature. Tree TLC. Water wisely. While oaks are pretty drought tolerant once established, young trees need consistent moisture, especially during hot, dry spells. Give your oak a deep watering, soaking the root zone once or twice a week during the first few years. Mulch magic. A layer of mulch around the base of your oak tree, 2 to 3 inches thick, will help retain moisture in the soil, regulate soil temperature, and suppress weeds that compete for nutrients. Keep the mulch a few inches away from the trunk to prevent rot. Fertilize, but not too much. Over-fertilizing can actually harm young oak trees. If your tree seems pale or isn't growing much after a few years, a light application of a balanced fertilizer in the spring might be beneficial. But a soil test can help you determine if fertilizing is even necessary. Pruning for strength. Extensive pruning isn't recommended for young oak trees, but you can do some light pruning to remove dead or diseased branches and encourage a strong central leader. Always prune with sharp tools and proper technique. For larger pruning jobs, consult a certified arborist. Be patient. Remember, oak trees are known for their slow and steady growth. They may not win any races, but that slow growth translates into a strong, long-lived tree that can grace your yard for centuries to come. Enjoy watching your oak grow alongside you. Why is my oak tree leaking sap? There are a couple of reasons why your oak tree might be leaking sap, and it's helpful to look at the leak itself for clues. Wound closure. This is the most likely scenario, especially if the leak is coming from a visible wound on the trunk or a branch. When an oak gets injured, like from a pruning cut, storm damage, or even an insect boring into it, it will naturally try to seal up the wound with sap. This sap acts as a barrier to prevent insects and diseases from entering the tree. The leak should slow down and eventually stop once the wound heals over. Slime flux. This is a bacterial infection that can cause an oak tree to leak sap, often in a slimy, discolored form. It typically occurs on the trunk or branches and might have a foul odor. While not usually fatal to the tree, it can weaken it and make it more susceptible to other problems. If you suspect slime flux, it's best to call a certified arborist for diagnosis and treatment recommendations. Insect infestation. Certain insects, like sap beetles or aphids, might also be attracted to the sap and could be contributing to the leak. Look for signs of the insects themselves near the leak. Here are some additional things to consider. Severity of the leak. A small amount of sap leaking from a minor wound is usually nothing to worry about. But a large, continuous leak can be a sign of a more serious issue. Health of the tree. Is your oak tree overall healthy and vigorous? If the tree seems weak or has other problems alongside the sap leak, it's a good idea to consult a professional. If you're concerned about the sap leak on your oak tree, especially if it's severe or accompanied by other symptoms, don't hesitate to call a certified arborist. They can assess the situation and recommend the best course of action to keep your oak tree healthy and happy. The importance of oaks. Oaks play a vital role in the environment. Their acorns are a valuable food source for many animals, including squirrels, deer, and birds. Their leaves provide shade and shelter, and their roots help to stabilize the soil. Oaks are also important to humans. Their wood is strong and durable, making it ideal for construction, furniture, and flooring. Facing the future. Despite their strength and resilience, oaks are facing a number of threats. Climate change, habitat loss, and pests and diseases are all taking a toll on these magnificent trees. It is crucial that we take steps to protect and conserve oaks for future generations. By planting trees, supporting conservation efforts, and educating others about the importance of oaks, we can all help to ensure that these magnificent trees continue to thrive for centuries to come. I believe that by understanding and appreciating the Quercus genus, we can deepen our connection to the natural world and inspire a sense of wonder and respect for these remarkable trees.